Hi everyone, my name is Frances and my research project is about 60s Swedish folk music. The pictures I added may seem a little bit random, but it's actually Sweden folk artwork. Just a brief side note. So to understand what Swedish folk music was in the 60s, we need a little bit of a backstory. After World War II, Sweden's society grew and expanded exponentially, but as it grew in prosperity, it seemed to lose touch with its history, its roots. So this caused young people to want reconnection with their roots, which sparked the 60s youth folk revival. One of the more popular bands that came from this revival is ABBA. Also, during this time period of the 60s, American folk music had peaked. The Swedish folk revival and folk music peaked in the 1970s. However, it was for different reasons. For instance, in America, young people were using it as a way to protest. But when these bands visited Sweden, they were almost always sold out. A few different ways Swedish folk is defined is by its instruments. For instance, there's the use of cordiophones, so the fiddle, the nickel harpa, but it also began to include flutes and the piano, as well as the saxophone, things like that. It's much like pop and rock music, but mixed with folklore. Most Swedish folk music is dance music. The signature music and dance within Swedish folk music is the polska. However, it experimented with different genres at this time, like jazz. Since polska is the signature of Sweden folk music, I wanted to go ahead and give a brief explanation of it. Polska is in a 3/4 time signature with an emphasis on the first and third beat, which helps create a lilting feeling that gives the dance energy and movement. Also, there are many types of polska. Each region of Sweden has their own. Also, during the time of the 60s, ensembles were created. So during the revival of folk music in Sweden, it took place in the 60s. Um, like I was saying before, folk music vocalists and instrumentalists, they had previously um, had solos. They never combined their music together. So during this time period, ensembles were created in Sweden. Um, Also, during the revival, the nickel harpa was also revived. New instruments were also experimented with, much like the genres and the ensembles were, like the piano, the flute, and the saxophone. I wanted to go ahead and talk about the nickel harpa because it's a traditional Swedish instrument that dates back more than 600 years ago. Nickel means key, and harpa roughly translates to stringed instrument. It almost died out in the 1900s, but made a comeback in the 60s. It has a total of 16 strings, so 3 melody strings, 1 drone string, and 12 sympathetic vibration strings. There are 37 wooden keys arranged to slide under the strings. Personally, I really appreciate the sound of the wooden keys because it almost offers a percussive noise. Here is a video of the nickel harpa. and that was the nickel harpa. Also, there is four versions of this instrument that are still played today. Lastly, I wanted to go ahead and share a brief video of one of the Swedish folk bands, ABBA. It's the most popular band from Sweden during this time. And that was the folk music band ABBA. Also, I will have links for both videos at the bottom just in case you wanted to go ahead and listen to either video or there was a problem with sound quality. So, just a brief recap, Swedish folk music in the 60s was due to the youth folk music revival. It had an effect on a number of changes, the inclusion and revival of instruments such as the nickel harpa, the Swedish bagpipes, and the hurdy-gurdy, as well as the saxophone, the flute, and the tambourine. These inclusions made inventions of new forms of Swedish folk music since it was originally a solo melody tradition. Swedish folk music has entered the educational system, which Musicians are becoming better skilled at younger ages. And that's a little bit about 60s Swedish folk music.